Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to Khayal Unfiltered, a space for honest and candid conversations. Thank you for being here and for agreeing to be a part of this conversation. Before we begin, I just want to say that there are no right or wrong answers here. This is just, it's not an interview, and it's not about saying the right thing. It is just simply a conversation, a candid, honest conversation. So the idea is to reflect, from where you are currently, not from where you think you should be. And the conversation looks at growing up without polishing it for comfort. This conversation is about talking about things that we perhaps were afraid of talking about when we were younger. So, for today's conversation, the idea is to talk about our experiences as students in school, college, and beyond. So, we will discuss who we were at the time, what shaped us, and then what we had to unlearn along the way. So, this is Growing Up Unfiltered. So, let's begin. We have with us Farah, we have Mehrunisa, Hassan, and Zuhaib. So I'd like you all to please introduce yourselves and also tell us when you graduated from school and then from college. Let's start with you, Farah.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm Farah. I'm a clinical psychologist currently. I graduated from my master's back in 2014 and from school back in 2010. So quite a while ago.
Yes, well, not as long as me though. G. Zohib.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Zoe. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and I did my school I graduated out from school back in 2003 and did my out of my college around 2005.
Okay. And Mehrunisa?
My name is Mehrunisa. I am a barrister focusing on corporate, constitutional, and human rights litigation and policy work. I graduated from school in 2011. I graduated from my undergrad in 2014, and I finished my postgraduate in legal studies in 2017. And I've been working in Lahore since.
Okay. And Hassan?
Assalamualaikum. My name is Hassan Iftikhar. So I'm basically a marketing professional. I graduated from my A levels in 2004, and then I did my bachelor's. I graduated from that in 2008, and I did my MBA in marketing in 2011. So yes, again, a while ago.
Yeah. So we've got the 2000s, like in the sense early and mid,
Yes.
yeah, 2014, 3. Okay. So we're covering a couple of decades here, 2 decades. And well, I graduated in from school. I did my O levels at that time. Senior Cambridge isko kaha jata tha. So in 1990 actually, which is like a whole world, a whole a lifetime ago. And then from college in 1994, and then I did my first master's and completed it in 1997. So when you think back to your school years, what feeling comes up first?
I think for me, the feeling is mostly now looking back, relief that it's over. It was not. It
Uh,
was not, for the most of it, it was not an experience that I enjoyed. I did enjoy some of the later years,
mhm.
but I think most of my school life, I was looking forward to graduating school.
Okay. So you would say while you were in school, it was kind of what is the word that would I know relief that it's over, but while you're in that
While
journey.
I think it was highly anxiety inducing.
All right.
No,
Yeah.
I absolutely get that. Yeah. I would second that. I mean, when coming to the question, I've had a very good experience when it comes to school. I mean, I've studied in the same school throughout from class 2 till A levels. So,
Mm.
when I think about my school, I am generally hit with, this very positive wave of nostalgia. But then again, it was also very anxiety ridden in the sense that, your experiences shape you when what you go through from your school years till you grow up. It really does affect you a lot, but yes, it was very stressful, and the word anxiety comes up a lot.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
I would second
Yep.
what Farah said.
I would definitely use the word anxiety also, but like in this specific, so I loved school. I loved the hours I would be in school. But what I really didn't like, and that's the main thing I recall, is how I was held accountable for all of those hours, like outside of school. वहाँ जाते साथ ही you have to account for कि like आपने क्या पढ़ा है, क्या काम किया है, and
Yeah,
that is the bit I
absolutely.
hated the most. कि घर आके भी ऐसा लगता था कि like the entire experience of life back then was school. School में भी school, बाहर भी school. The school वाला school I was fine with, but like back at home I hated the idea I'm accountable for homework and all of those.
So you felt like you didn't really get a break. घर भी आके वही हो रहा है, वही बस there's no relief.
Yeah, on one hand that, and the other that like you're being asked about like all of that, and that the whole idea of accountability back there, within school I was happy with whatever I was demanded and asked for, like, but I was very unhappy and anxious about like having to explain to them get like what I have done and not done back at home.
Okay.
For me, I think if I look back on my school years, they were mostly happy years. Like someone said, like there's a lot of nostalgia when I look back at it, and I absolutely loved school. In some ways, I think those were probably the most carefree years of my
Yes.
life.
Okay.
But that said, at that time, as a very driven, achievement-oriented girl, what I didn't realize was that while I was constantly in school getting, that feeling of validation, that feeling of a pat on my back, like if you get, you're performing the best in your class, you're doing well, you're getting good grades, there's that constant, it's kind of like dopamine, right? And that external validation that's pouring through. Um, and in adult life, actually, I realized that in some ways, the academic system does not train us adequately for life, because in your normal work life, you don't have any bosses who are every day saying you are the best employee or you are doing, and there were some things in school which at that point in time, and this is, I'm talking about senior years, so A levels, that felt like life and death, things like student council, which also I think was politicized unnecessarily, and those kind of things could have been handled better, I think, by the school administration for sure. But they were, at that time, it felt like my life depends on this. And that is perhaps something that I didn't fully comprehend the impact of that when I was going through it. But later on, I was able to see how that could be perhaps psychologically damaging for a lot of children also. One thing that I want to mention, I think one thing that absolutely made my school experience and constituted a big part of it in O levels and A levels was debating. Because I was involved in competitive, I think that was like, that defined the experience of school. And I loved that so much. And, the way that we were being taught how to think, I think I learned more in debating camp, and it taught me how to think more than a lot of the classrooms that I was in. So that would be my experience in a nutshell.
Okay. Yeah. So, what really, prompted me to have this conversation was a class that I was teaching, in which one of the students were divided into groups, and they had to comment on curriculum and their curriculum in school and how it shaped them and impacted them. It was about curriculum, learning and assessment and etc. And there was one group that made a poster with in the center, it was written 7 ways my school tortured me. And then there were these branches and lots of, and so that made me, because I've been a teacher for most of my life, adult life, so that really made me very sad to think that as teachers also, we are unable to see a lot of the things, because, well, that's another podcast. But coming back to being a student, I know from my generation there was a lot of stress, and also not as much as you all. आपकी generation में थोड़ा फर्क था, but हमारे लिए ये था कि बहुत सारी चीजें नहीं समझ आ रही थी. We didn't know a lot of things. There was a lot of lack of clarity. And when I started teaching, I realized that students today, like आपकी generation या उससे पहले, we had a lot more things were a lot more organized and taught in a different fashion than how it was taught to us. So I can just make that comparison, that I didn't understand anything in school somehow. which question, that question is also coming up. I'll discuss it in more detail when we discuss that. So when you think of yourself, what kind of a person were you during that phase of your life, your school? So we're talking primarily about school now. What were you like
Yeah.
at that time?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think quite different to how I am now. I think growing up in school, I was quite shy, very introverted, not very outgoing. And I would spend a lot of my time reading. I still do that, but a lot of my time reading, daydreaming, in my head
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot, which is, I think, different to now.
Okay. Mehrunisa, would you like to?
I think in some ways maybe I was sort of like personality-wise the same. Like I was extroverted, I was confident, I enjoyed being the center of attention, be it like in dramatics or public speaking, etc.
Mm.
But I also think that I was a naughty child. Like I was talkative, I was mischievous, and that is something that constantly being talkative was constantly like a bad thing, right? Your
Mm.
teachers were telling you,
Mm.
especially at a younger age, don't, she's very
Yeah.
talkative. At the PTC, they'd say to my mother, oh, she's very smart, but she's very talkative. I
Mm.
remember at one point, it was in grade 6 or 7. In the middle of the school year, they said they were reshuffling the sections
Mm.
because there was class disruption, and the reshuffling was just separating me and my best friend. So there
Oh.
was just two girls which were just like separated, no other. And I remember that was quite like, and my parents, I think, then had to write to the principal because I was upset. I wanted to be. It was the middle of the school year. It was just me, so it was like pointing out to a kid and saying, this is the troublemaking duo. And then I mean they reversed that, but I mean it was being talkative or being curious. And I think if you were asking a lot, if you didn't understand, like you were just saying, a lot of things we didn't understand in school, in the classroom, right? You were perhaps before an exam sitting with the textbook on your own at home, and that's when you did a lot of the absorption of the knowledge. But that what I remember is that being talkative was a bad thing. That was something that I was made to feel negatively about.
Mm. And that must have felt somewhat like a punishment, being separated, right?
Yes, it did. Especially because it was one child that you were singling out and
Yes.
sending to the other. So it really did feel like a punishment. And I think that uh, I mean I think I bounced back from that. But it that kind of it's negative messaging for a child at a very young age,
Yeah.
basically.
And it shapes you in a negative, adverse manner, of course. Yeah.
Totally. See, you're
Yeah.
you're a confident kid, so perhaps you
Yeah.
were able to outgrow or you sort of whatever you felt at that time, you were able to let go of that feeling and move on. But there are lots of children who are unable to do that,
Who can't? Yeah.
and it really,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Hassan is saying, it really
Yeah.
shapes them into and
Yes.
शायद वो डरना शुरू हो जाए उसके बाद. I know that
Mm.
I was afraid all the time. I
Same.
all the
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I completely agree. So my experience as a child, I was, again, like Farah mentioned, I think, I'm quite on the same page. I was introverted, not very confident. I kept to myself, So, I loved art. I used to daydream about drawing. We used to play a lot, since um, uh, the school was huge. Apart from academics, it offered a lot of sports facilities as well. So I mean, we had an avenue to express ourselves completely. But then again, and I also have an identical twin who was in my class with me, so that helped. But so that shapes you in a completely different way because you are looked as an entity, you're not looked as an individual.
Mm.
People look at you as Hassan Hussain, not as Hassan an individual. But that's fine. I mean, it has its perks. So I was, as a child, I was, and now looking, in retrospect, I can say that, I was quite different. I'm much more confident now. But as you mentioned, the element of fear. So, in during my period of schooling, fear was, literally inculcated into, the students. The system was as such that, you could not ask questions like, Mehrunisa mentioned, if you were talkative and if you asked questions, because I specifically remember experiences of, as a student, I was not very, very studious, but I used to ask questions for your own comprehension. And
Mm,
asking questions was, looked down upon, in the sense that, you were censured and criticized for
mm,
asking questions. And that happened till very later, till my A levels. So
mm,
the spark that you have as a child to ask, the curiosity, that was quite that was hindered and curtailed quite a bit, at least in my experience.
mm. Yeah, that I mean, I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but yeah, that used to happen a lot back then, or
Yeah.
हमारे time में तो बहुत ज़्यादा. So for me, the fear generally was that I wasn't doing as well as I should. So हमेशा डर कि oh
Yes.
my God अब ये हो जाएगा. Oh my God consequences. Oh my God fail तो नहीं हो जाऊंगी. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
things
absolutely.
like that. So yeah, जी Zuhaib.
I think the one word I would use, okay, how was it back then, was very involved. And there were a lot of fears and anxieties. Like I wasn't very anxious. I was also very carefree. I cared not for like my grades and whatever जो है, comes out of like performance and all. But very fearful of like direct confrontations, and teachers used to be quite like not so kind back then, at least at
Yeah.
my school. That was quite an experience. So like those direct confrontations and like I don't want to talk about so that scared me, but not performance. Otherwise, I was very carefree and very involved in classes, very curious. Teachers also loved that.
Mm,
Very social, quite unlike how things are for me today.
okay. I guess yeah, life changes us. Our experience changes us, and हम निकलते कुछ हैं और फिर बनते कुछ हैं eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah. So tell me, what was the hardest part for you? The hardest part that you didn't really talk about at that time, the schools. सबसे मुश्किल क्या लगता था और बात भी नहीं कर सकते थे about it?
I think two things. So while Mehrunisa was talking, it was actually really interesting for me because my experience in school was I almost felt like being shy or being quiet was not acceptable.
Mm,
And it felt like the school kind of expected a certain level of extroversion, outgoing, and yeah, it just really felt very, I guess, kind of, there was this repeated message of you're not okay being shy, being introverted, and that's not acceptable. And I felt very excluded. I think that was the hardest part because I didn't feel like I really belonged within the classroom. So it would be like a lot of, I went to an all girls school. So a lot of the other girls would be quite confident, outgoing, much louder than me. And it really felt like by the students, I was seen as, I don't know, arrogant or I'm not really sure how they saw me. I think they saw me as arrogant because I used to really struggle with Urdu, even though Urdu is, our first language. For a long time, I used to struggle to be fluent in it. So there was a sense like, oh, you don't speak in Urdu on purpose. Or, oh, you're better than us because you don't watch Bollywood, for example. So a lot of exclusion from the classroom. Then also, I felt at an administrative level, they kind of really put a lot of focus on the students they'd already decided are like the star students. So, these are the girls who are going to be in debates. These are the girls who are going to be in the school choir. These are the girls who are going to be doing sports. And even if you did try out for those activities and maybe you had the knowledge or the skills, you were never really given equal opportunities, or at least that's how I felt, that one wasn't given an equal opportunity. So it felt really, I guess, lonely. And that was one of the hardest things to speak about because I think as a child, what you really need, and this is partly me speaking as a psychologist, is a sense of belonging and a sense of connection and a sense of, I think, acceptance of who you are and who you're becoming. And not having that was really, really hard. I think for a long time, I couldn't even put my finger on what exactly this feeling was that I'd really been struggling with all those years. But now I think it was just this sense of not belonging, a sense of isolation.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
That's heavy. The you know,
Difficult to speak about.
the teacher in me is
Yeah, yeah.
feeling sad when I hear that, and I understand it very well myself.
Mm,
So, okay,
absolutely.
Zuhaib, coming to you.
As I said earlier, like definitely the hardest part was the academics on its own, like not so much of, for me at least, the whole social side of school life. And obviously that's not something I would ever talk about. It was seen of as very obvious कि school years है, आपने पढ़ना होता है and आपने perform करना होता है. For me, all that mattered was कि I was showing up, I was being attentive, I was taking interest, but like I was really tired of and like really bothered by this whole like and like the whole system where you have to um spend like a good part of your life just doing stuff, and of course never talked about that. That felt quite abnormal. I just have to blend in. So, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that, there was this constant pressure to just perform, 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 do, but not think about what you're doing. Is that what you're saying?
There also like, but like on a social level you don't connect with others because like like what life is for you and like what the whole experience is for you being in school, being a kid of that age, it was quite different from how it was for everyone around you. Let's say like it's exams coming and like everyone is all about exams, and that's not what I want to be about. Like I want to just talk and like have fun with life. Also in school, like of course in those free times, and so it's so I think now that I think about it, it was like an isolating experience, surely, like because like you're like there's a whole mismatch of values. Like it's not just that you're fighting the system, it's also that everyone around you is like part of that value system and you just don't fit in that sense.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Ji, Mehrunisa.
I think what I didn't talk about at that time, and probably something I didn't realize at the time, is just the amount of pressure. And I mean, I look at the kids now, for instance, who are applying to college, and it's even more. Like it's times 100 the
Yes.
amount, because we grew up without college counselors, without, building your activity profile and all of those things. And I mean, still, I think the amount of pressure that was put on, be it like you're a potential high achiever, you have to get a distinction, be it why aren't I remember a constant theme was, why aren't you winning every debating tournament that you're going to? And we used to be called into the admin's office after every tournament that we didn't win. And I mean, that also, it kind of I think started to, at a later stage, take the fun out of an activity that I just loved for the activity, right? Because it was just constantly about, and it was, now that I look back at it, it was dehumanizing in some way, because you are looking at a child not in terms of what can we as a school do for this child, but you're looking at what is this child going to do for my marketing, right? How can I place this child in a some kind of box that I can put up on a bulletin or put up on a, I don't know, pamphlet, whatever. And what Farah, I'd just like to add to what Farah said. I absolutely agree with that, and that is something that I think I think there is no greatness in a school, or that is, a child who's already confident, who's like, putting them in your annual play or putting them in your debates team. Your duty as a school, because everyone's paying the same amount of tuition
Yeah.
fees, right, is to bring out those qualities, that confidence in every child, to nurture the fullest potential of every single child. And that is something that they weren't doing, and that is, again, like, it's, you're just seeing what can I pick and how do they serve my interests as a, profit making institution at the end of the day. You're not looking at what am I bringing into this person's life. And I think that kind of being reduced to the grades that you can get or the tournaments that you can win, and having your self-worth or value
Mm,
tied to that,
mm,
is was perhaps not a good thing. And it is something, and I mean, we'll probably discuss this later, but it's something that did not stand me in good stead in for the rest of my life. I think I was ill prepared for adult life because of this.
mm. Agreed, agreed. This, yeah, dehumanizing is the term I would use
Yeah.
here, because as a teacher, also eventually when I started feeling very unhappy doing what working, was when we were forced to literally reduce students to statistics.
Mm.
How many A stars, how many A's, how many distinctions, and somewhere the child got lost in there. So we were just focusing on एग्जाम टेक्निक्स बस ए स्टार आ जाएगा किसी तरह से बाकी all of this was irrelevant what they were feeling. Or yeah, so that is one of the things that really made me quite upset about what I did, and which is when I decided that this is not for me. Anyhow, Hassan.
Yeah. So no, I completely agree with what everyone is saying, and I think we've all shared similar experiences. But for the one of the hardest things for me, as as a child in school in my early years, was that the school had a very carrot and stick method of ensuring discipline. It was a very archaic, pre-colonial type of a system where you had to ensure that discipline was followed. So it was really strict, and in that environment as a child, you could see, how it affected students and children. So, discipline was ensured in a lot of ways that how can I put this in a way that doesn't sound, strange, but, it was really strict. Teachers used to interact with students in a way that, I think would not be acceptable in this day and age.
Hmm.
So looking at that, that was something that I as remember as a child I never shared at home. Because it was somewhat traumatizing. Teachers being very very aggressive with students. So you kept that, you bottled that in, you internalized that. I at least as a child did that, and I never ever shared that with my parents in the sense that I don't know why. I felt the need to internalize it, but I didn't. Because I think maybe with the fact that it was the norm back then and it was acceptable. So, I just thought as a child that it would not make any difference. So I never did that. And mingled with that, the added pressure of being the best, we were taught that you have to have the best grades, you have to be the best in sports. That accumulated stress of, being the best in class, and having teachers that were very strict. So that sort of was something that was really hard to talk about. It is very easy for me now to discuss it with my parents because I think few days ago this topic came up. We were discussing because I have younger nieces who go to schools, and she's in the early years. She's in class one. So, this is something that we were discussing, that, as children, we never, at least in my generation, we never used to come home and tell our parents, kids, and, this is what happened in school, the teacher did that, or, this is what she said to this student, because maybe it was the norm back then, but, looking at the reaction of my parents, they were like, you should have come and told us, you should have talked to us, because, it might have been easier for you, because I have we have very supportive I have very supportive parents in the sense that they were always very encouraging. But
Hmm.
the school system and the culture at school, it was a very carrot and stick method. So I think that culture, at least for me, it really affected me in a way that it hindered my confidence and for me, and that led to me internalizing a lot of things, and that also that gives you anxiety as well. So yeah, and the added pressure to get grades, be the best student. Our school specifically focused a lot on being the best by getting the best grades, and being better than all other schools. So that again, from a very young and early age, that you had a lot of stress to do good in your tests, prepare for your exams. There was always a test, and then you had your exams. So there was a lot of stress and pressure to perform.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
I understand that. So in our generation, वो stress नहीं था इतना ज़्यादा performance का या college counseling etc etc. They were a lot simpler the times. And I did. I mean, my parents put me in this really lovely school actually, which was very new, with a very lovely principal and all of that. I felt where the shortcoming was in the teaching. So not to say that there was something wrong with the school or with the leadership, or it was just that the teachers I felt were
Mm.
not equipped.
Yes,
And so, with a
completely
child like
agree.
me, Farah, I understand what you're saying, that I was also a quiet, withdrawn kind of a child, very, very shy, and also not doing very well academically. So, for me, it was always a place where I dreaded going to school because it became like I'm not doing well enough. And then I met with a couple of very nice teachers, but very mean teachers as well, who kind of would be okay singling out a child in front of the entire class. So, I suppose it came from a place of not knowing. That's how I see it when I look back. But back then, I was very afraid of failure, and I was failing in certain subjects. It was only later that I discovered that I was just not being able to understand anything. My style of learning ही फर्क था, which is my next question. That how do you how did you learn best back then? I mean, in the sense that what were your learning, किस तरह से आप learn कर रहे थे, या what was, what helped you learn and understand, and did the school actually support that or work against it? I know that with me it was working against me, but how was it for you, learning how you learned best? And yeah, Farah.
I think I felt similarly that the school wasn't really able to support the kind of learning that would have helped me flourish. I do love learning. Like now, even though I graduated like 12 years ago, I continue to study, things related to my field, and I love that. But I feel the way that we were taught, there was such an emphasis, especially in younger grades, on just memorizing content and having to recall content and reproduce that in exams. And I think I learn best when I'm interested and when I'm engaged with a subject, and when, for example, it's presented a little bit like a story, or in some format that's a bit more creative. That's usually the best way for me to learn. I still remember this one instance. I don't know if it was grade 2 or 3, like a very young class. And there was a question in the exam on the solar system, and it was something like, which is the red planet? And I didn't remember that because of what we studied in class. I remember that because of this cartoon series I was watching called Ninja Robots, in which they were traveling to Mars, and it was the red planet. So recall of certain things was easier when it was presented in a story creative context, something a bit more engaging for me. But in school, I often felt that the teachers were overworked and already highly stressed, and it was very difficult for them to give individualized attention to each child or to adapt their teaching to the needs of each child. So I think that's where I felt quite a lack, and I really struggled with that because I noticed such a difference when I moved to higher grades and I started doing much, much better, and I started enjoying my studies because we would have smaller classes and there was a lot more individual attention. And I was also learning things I wanted to learn and I was interested in.
Yeah, it's quite similar to my journey, Farah. But G, Zuhaib.
So like the schools that I've been in, they weren't quite systematic, and like the benefit of which was there was no like overall theme to how learning was back there. Like every teacher had their own system and their own like way, which is how it is probably, but like it was like drastically different from how like a teacher like the styles differed quite a lot. And I was lucky enough to find my style. So I would love the teaching to be conversational, as in the teacher is talking to us, like me directly, the class directly, as if the teacher knows these are kids that they're talking to, and it's this back and forth going on, and they're not just reading something out and not just writing something over the board. That I would absolutely hate. So, and I was lucky enough to have like quite a lot of teachers doing exactly that, where they would just sometimes also gossip around the subject and just be casual around it. And I think the way I see it is that apart from the subject, like back in that age, you also have to learn how things are done, how you study, learn like generally also apart from the subject. So I guess that bit of learning that was wonderful for me in school. And subject to subject, like learning actual subjects, of course there were some like really bad teachers and who would just read out, but I like that like they're just
Yeah.
here to fulfill their like responsibility, just get their salary and all, and that was terrible. So it was a mix of both, and but I was lucky enough to find my kind of teachers, like at least 50% of them. Yeah.
I feel एक दो भी अच्छी टीचर्स हो मिल जाए ना आपको तो वो आपको बदल देते हैं. That happened with me actually. But anyway, so Mehrunisa, what about you and your learning style?
I think I learn the best when it's like Zuhaib said, conversational, or when there are discussions. And my literature classes were always like that. History also, to an extent, was like that, where there was no wrong answer, and perhaps that's the nature of those subjects also. But I think it depends a lot on the teacher, right? A teacher that's teaching a humanities subject can also be very pedantic and intolerant to difference of opinion or difference of interpretation for that matter. But I think in my experience with those subjects, I always enjoyed. I didn't want to miss those classes. I wanted to go to each class because I was engaged. I wasn't zoning out. I think with most of my other classes I was totally zoned out in when I was in the classroom. um because it was either like making someone read from a textbook and then, or just asking you to do a question. There's no engagement per se, and when the teacher themselves is looking bored, then that kind of has a trickle down effect on the energy of the
Yeah.
classroom and the mood of the classroom as well. So I think where the teachers were energized and you could see that you weren't scared to speak up कि गलती हो जाएगी या कोई, it was just like you were actually thinking, coming up with creative answers, responses. And that is where I think, and those subjects ended up being my favorite subjects, and I ended up pursuing them later on in higher studies also because of that positive experience. So I think uh, a teacher can really make or break a student's relationship with a particular field altogether, and that's an immense amount of power that you have over a child at that age. So yes, I think definitely more conversational, discussion based, engaging, making it, and linking it to things outside the textbook also. Like if you're talking about the Victorian times, for example, right? Like linking that to similarities in Pakistani society. We're not necessarily going to write about that in our O level or A level exam, but allowing your brain to draw links with what you're studying in class to other things. And interdisciplinary approach also, that really helps me retain information when I kind of conceptually understand something. Because that, once you understand the concept, it sticks in your head. Once it's there, it's like knowing how to ride a bike, it doesn't disappear then. So that is something that I think I enjoyed that style of teaching a lot more.
Yeah, so more interactive, where you're free to express your opinion. You're
Yeah.
free from any kind of fear or judgment or yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Hassan.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I will just echo what Mehrunisa and Farah mentioned. I completely, absolutely agree with it. For me also, you know, initially the focus was on rote learning things, but when you had a very engaging and collaborative way of when teachers collaborated with students, and when it was a two-way street, when you had conversations, that is when what was being taught to you resonated to you, and that is how you learned. And very, very rightfully, like Maranasa said, that the teacher, if the teacher had the knack of creating a link of what was being taught to tying it to the real world, and giving you analogies and making sure that you understand it with your reality, that is how it stuck, and that is where comprehension came in, and not just rote learning things. So yes, I loved in literature, I loved economics, and I had very, very good teachers in my O levels. Specifically, one of my English teachers, she had a profound impact on me, and even still we are in touch. I am in touch with her. I had the best experience with her, and we had very good teachers. It's not just all bad. So I had very good, and this was, later in life, during my O and A levels, we had teachers who, talked about life. It wasn't about studies. So, like, Mehrunisa also mentioned, you having general conversations about life, what you perceive of life, what you want to do in the future, that really opens up your horizons and your mind to, what you want to do. Start thinking from an early age, what you can be, what the future holds. So it's, there's having a good teacher really makes a huge difference. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I echo what everyone else has said. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I agree. So, I mean, for me, I have at the senior level in grade 9, 10, 11, I had some very tough teachers and some teachers who were very unkind, unkind in the sense that, like I said earlier, pointing out, for me, I never even knew what my learning style was, to be honest. All I knew was कि बस मुझे ये marks लेके आने हैं, रट्टा मारना है या whatever, और वो marks भी नहीं आ रहे हैं और teachers भी कुछ कह रही हैं कि you can't write, you can't, literally saying this is not your work or this is not how it's supposed to be done in front of an entire class. And I remember I took tuition at that time, class 11 May, and there was this teacher who, we wrote an essay and he read out my essay in class and said, this is how characters need to be developed. And I was like, oh my God, really? I mean, can I actually, write well or whatever? So, yeah, so I discovered that for example, I discovered my learning style later on when I joined college, actually, when I got really good teachers who saw me for the person that I was. Even in a large class, I could feel I was free enough to go to them after class and say, you know what, I didn't quite get that. Somehow the shift happened for me in college, not in school. School, I was always afraid, not knowing mujhe. And if I look back, I don't know, I'm sure it's not the same with you all, but when I look back to my school, I don't remember anything that I've learned. Nothing. And when I look back to my college years, I remember. And so, like you, Farah, what you were saying, I finally took subjects that I loved, which was literature and applied psychology. So, and then got teachers who were A, qualified, and B, more compassionate. And so
Mm.
this element of fear somehow just disappeared,
Absolutely.
just like that. And I started loving education,
Mm.
learning. So in context of that, what does education mean to you? And
Mm.
think about what it meant to you then, or say, forget not then. Let's just what is education to you?
Mm.
Has it changed in the years?
I think initially, when I was younger, perhaps I had a very limited view of education just as schooling and as what we learn in school. But over time, my view of education is more like a way of experiencing the world, like a fuller way, engaging with cultures and societies and people and language and history and art and literature. I think that for me is a real education. What helps a person be more well rounded as an individual, more engaged with themselves, their environment, and other people.
Okay. Mehrunisa? I'm sorry, I'm calling out like I'm this teacher calling out. Please feel free to feel free to say whatever you feel like saying. I feel like I'm
Um,
in a class.
no, I think it's keeping it orderly.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah,
of, we all start speaking at the same
I
time, then
agree.
there's I think to me, education, it would be the ability to detach or unlearn the perspective that has been kind of that you've been socialized in, or that you've been kind of, that's been thrown at you, you know, since childhood, um, and being able to think and form opinions on your own. So I think critical thinking is something that I hold very, very valuable, and that to me is the ability to question things constantly, right? And that might mean that you become a very annoying human being sometimes, and like my mother says, you argue for the sake of arguing. But I think it's really important for a human being to make sense of the world. That's how we make sense of the world around us, and we figure that's how we discover our own self also, right?
Yeah.
It's when at some level we're like, ये चीजें मुझे सिखाई गई हैं बचपन से, this is how I'm supposed to be, this is, but what is my own opinion? And there are some, be it political views, whatever, that, you know, growing up in a particular society, that's the norm, that's what people around you, everyone's saying that. And I think the ability to just take a pause and be like, okay, but how do I see this, right? What is my own unique perspective bringing to my interpretation of this situation? And then being able to kind of structure that thinking in a kind of independent argument kind of way. Like that to me is a mental exercise that I hold very dearly. And I think that is something that has helped me immensely in academics, in exams, in any situation in life. So that to me would be the most crucial thing.
Okay. Ji Hassan.
Yeah, I completely. It's a very interesting perspective because, yeah, I mean, we've been always, it has been literally bludgeoned into our brains that, education is just getting a degree, learning from books, but that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
I mean, academics, of course, plays a vital and a huge part in, your learning. But, yes, education is, treading through life, meeting people, seeing, like Farah said, experiencing cultures, having conversations, reading books, doing things that you're not comfortable with, interacting with people, accepting yourself for who you are, realizing, you have to learn, you have to improve. So yeah, it's a very diverse and a very broad term in the sense that you still, learn every day. I work, I'm not studying anymore, but I think I'm still educating myself on a lot of things, that you get to learn on a daily basis. So I think it's a very evolutionary process apart from the conventional education that we all get. I mean, that is something that is that everyone does and everyone gets. But when it comes to, for example, higher education, when I went to university, like you also mentioned, Aisha, I think my major phase of learning and education, that is something that I realized when I joined university, because you had teachers who were, like not unkind. They were, you had conversations. You could actually learn things, and then you understood that, it's not just math, English, science. There's more to education as well.
Yes.
So yeah, yes, I mean that, and specifically when you start to get an interest in learning more, you study subjects that that interest you, that is something that you think you can pursue in the future. So I mean that is when you realize that education of course plays a very very important part, not just the academic conventional education, but the education that you receive in general through life as well. Yeah.
Hmm. Ji Zuhaib.
Mm. So definitely agree with most of these ideas, especially Mehrunisa's gave, like where on a meta level, like where you expect education to be something which tells you how to think and argue, like because there's this sense of otherness to education. There's this like subject that's out there, pata nahi kahan se hai, like books that have been written, knowledge that has been known, and I think good education demolishes that boundary and it places you amongst like in the center of it, like where you uh you understand how you come up with your own knowledge and get it validated and all. So but apart from that, I had two very specific ideas of what education had and like have of what education means. They're a bit contradictory mutually, but I'll just put them out there. So one being that I expected education to be, so this can be a bit controversial. I expected education to be something that uh, relieved me of the whole effort of going out and learning those things on my own. Like as in there's this teacher and this class which actually teaches me how something is and like all of that. And like me not having to actually go through all of that on my own. That's what I expected it to be, and which a lot of yeah. Secondly, I think one thing I couldn't do on my own, like out of reading books and what education for me was like the whole system was supposed to fulfill for me was the whys of things. Like when with every subject, like why is it that you should know about this, and like why is it like this, like it's taught in the first place,
Yeah.
like, and like inspire me to actually be interested in that subject. Because like but there wouldn't have been like a primary source for me like to be randomly interested in chemistry unless like a teacher really showed to me okay, like yeah. And back then there wasn't much of internet, and that would have been my only source of inspiration. So I think that would be was a very central role of education for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think eventually the role of education is also to make you become independent. To firstly cater to your cognitive, social, emotional, all three domains, so that you're safe and you feel good enough or good in all three domains. Farah, you can correct my language here, but
Good enough is correct.
so I mean that emotionally भी आप safe feel कर रहे हैं, socially भी आप you're able to socialize, आपको समझ भी आ रहा है आप क्या कर रहे हैं, और like you said for Mehrunisa also एक disciplinary approach है. आप सब यही कह रहे हैं कि you're going beyond just the subject, because turning into a whole person, and then eventually the role is to make you independent and for you to be able to do things on your own with this prior knowledge that you take with you. I know that I keep telling my children that enjoy your learning, for God's sake. Don't be so fixated on the grades and this and that, but it's easier said than done. But all I tell them is enjoy, learn, open your mind. And when you open your mind to things, when you're experimenting, failing, doing well, you will become a better human person. You'll be better able to deal with challenges that life eventually throws your way. So yeah, failure I think is also so important. But coming back to you all, what changed the most for you when you entered a more independent phase like college? I know we've touched upon a little bit about it, but what changed for you?
I think the biggest change for me was that something similar to what Nissa initially mentioned, where she spoke about this emphasis on getting distinctions and high grades. So by O and A levels, I was amongst the high achievers for English language and English literature. And I didn't realize how much that impacted me until I went to university. And on my first assignment, I got a very average grade. And I was like, oh my God, like how is this happening? Like it really shook me up. And I realized that this is a completely different environment, a completely different kind of learning that's expected as compared to school, and that I don't have to hold myself to those really high, sometimes unrealistic standards. So I think that really took a while for me to adjust to adjust my expectations of myself, to focus less on grades and more on actually learning and enjoying what I'm learning. And then I think another thing that was different was also how much extra reading was expected. So even though in A levels we did have supplemental reading for subjects, it wasn't as extensive. And I noticed in my first year of university that the recommended readings were basically essential readings. It wasn't like, oh, you can read one or two of these. You had to read all of them. And I was like, oh, wait, this is a lot of work. But I eventually grew to really enjoy that. And like it gave me a broader perspective of what I was learning and helped me engage better and come up with more critical thought. So it was a wonderful experience, but it did take some time for me to adjust to that kind of learning and to develop the skills I needed for that and the discipline.
Okay. G would like to go first. Or Shravani? Hassan, आप बताएं. How was
Yeah.
college?
Ji, yeah, so I completely agree with what Farah said. So yeah, going from OA levels to university, I mean the first thing that struck me was that how different this style of education is, because you study for 3 years and 2 years for one exam. But when you go to university, the style changes to the semester system. And for me, it really worked to my advantage that it was completely stark. There was a stark contrast from OA levels to university. So I that really suited me. I loved it in the sense that you had to participate and involve yourself in every aspect of study, class participation, your quizzes, like Farah mentioned, supplemental reading. And yes, that is when I realized that, you had to do a lot of the reading yourself. You had to, read through the books. Of course, your professor and your teachers taught you, but they also taught you to be independent in the way that you have to, start reading yourself independently, start studying, which was very, very different, from what I had experienced before. So going into university, I loved it. Not having to study 3 years for one exam was, a huge relief for me. So it really helped. The fact that if you, for example, did not perform well in your midterms, you knew for a fact that you could make it up with, doing well in quizzes, with your projects, with your finals, and generally learning in general, it became fun because you liked going to university, you liked interacting with your teachers, you liked, talking to your classmates because, it was not very juvenile anymore. You could have meaningful discussions with your class fellows and your teachers. And that style of learning and education, I really loved it. I had a wonderful experience from, going from school to university. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think for me too. So, Zuhaib, what was
Mm.
college like for you? I mean,
Um, so
what
like
changed?
so nothing basically. So like so I went through medical school, right? So there's not really it being more independent or any of those. It's the same as school. I think they call it school for that good reason.
Okay.
So no, nothing
So
changed for me.
same.
I think if anything, it was worse because that is absolutely something they would expect of us to be for us to have our independent thinking to to be more independent, to read out from books that of our own choosing. That's what they would claim, but that's not how we were evaluated against. So it was quite like a double standard that we were put against, and it was quite traumatizing. That like a fake sense of independence, and so yeah, that's how it was for me.
Okay. Yeah. Med school, it explains. It's a lot of padhai, है ना? More padhai than the school ka padhai. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Mehrunisa?
I think what changed for me in college was and this is something Farah mentioned, it was humbling. I think the first month or so was humbling because it was like, I'm not automatically the brightest, smartest person in this group. There are people who are way smarter than me. There are people who are uh, much better than me. I am an average person over. So that kind of in a system that kind of bigs you up so much, and you're like, oh, I know, I'm the, I'm so good at every, like it was a coming back to harsh reality. It was a harsh reality check in some way that you're not all that, and you have to work super super hard. And I mean, like Farah said, the reading was much more extensive, but in some ways I felt like, because college was such an end all of, like,
Mm.
throughout school life, everything you were doing was to get into that particular college. So
Yeah.
once you were there, I felt like I actually relaxed a bit.
Yeah.
Like I think that pressure was taken off because I was like, I'm here now. And in the UK system, it's I mean, you have to try really hard to fail a humanities degree, right? So in
Mm.
some ways, that to me it was like, okay, I don't have to, I'm going to enjoy this experience for what it has to offer and not stress about, I have to get a first class, I have to get the highest marks in this group. And I think what I really enjoyed was the tutorial system, like, which basically meant that I was, for every paper I was doing, I was writing an essay a week, and then I was sitting one on one, or like maximum 3 or 4 students to one tutor, and I was kind
Mm.
of defending what I had written.
Mm.
um And sometimes, frankly, I had not done all my readings that week, and I'd Googled Spark Note summaries of that text if I had missed out on a reading, And my tutor saw through that, and he would say, "Did you actually read it?" So it was like getting the fear of authority, I think, that had been so ingrained
Mm.
in me went away, and perhaps went away a bit too much in college. Like I feel like I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was involved in other experiences that college also has to offer, and I think the papers that I was taking, etc., were not. I was not taking them with a view like, "इसमें सबसे ज़्यादा scoring easy होगी," या "I will get the
Mm.
highest grade." It
Mm.
was genuinely like, "What is my area of interest?" And
Mm.
then and I think I felt like it was a low pressure situation, like more like I took the pressure off of myself.
Mm.
I feel when I got to college.
And probably
Maybe I
enjoyed
was
it.
experiencing burnout also from all those highly stressful years. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I also like one thing that I'd like to mention is that it kind of कॉलेज लाइफ में क्योंकि स्कूल इज वेरी स्ट्रक्चर्ड
Mm.
कॉलेज लाइफ इज especially in the UK system, it is structured, but it's not so super structured, right?
Mm.
So
Mm. Mm.
एक आपको it that kind of school preparation also doesn't prepare you well in a scenario where you have to come up with your own structure, and that's something I
Mm.
still struggle with in my work life, right? i'm
Mm.
i'm not good at I'm very good at thriving in environments where there's imposed structure, but where I have to come up with it, I'm not a self starter,
Mm.
basically, right? Like, or not a very good self starter. So that is something that I think I was also realizing in college, कि मैंने पूरा हफ्ता है to do something, but मैं 5 दिन अब कुछ नहीं करी क्योंकि कोई प्रेशर नहीं है, कोई
Mm.
डेडलाइन
Mm.
नहीं है सर पे,
Mm.
और
Mm.
फिर सडनली मैं एक ऑल नाइटर करके आई एम राइटिंग द एसे. सो इट वाज in some ways like ill prepared through school years for college life also, that I think I was
Mm.
realizing by that time,
Mm.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Oh, in a total sense, absolutely. Now, I was just recalling what a student said to me. एक दो students ने ये कहा कि, like you said, कि school में things were so tough, especially in the O and A level, particularly in the A level. There was so much pressure, politicizing of this councils and this, that, the other, and competition and all kinds
Yeah.
of meanness and this, that, the other, that they felt that once, and this particular person went to a really good competitive college in America, and she said that I felt like I could breathe again. And it was not as difficult as what school was, or perhaps
Yeah.
it had the school, it was like being in a jungle and it just had taught you to survive in a
Mhm.
jungle. As a survive, as it taught me how to survive. And then for me, this college was just like a walk in the park.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think college was like, people ask me, and I think O levels, A levels exams का एक खौफ मेरे ऊपर तारी हुआ था, which in
uh,
college just, although it was a more competitive environment,
yes,
but
yes.
that just kind of went away in
Hmm.
college, I feel.
That's true. That's true. And also another thing that another child told me once was that school mein there was such unhealthy
Competition.
competition, unhealthy
Yeah, yeah.
competition was encouraged, and it was
And
between
comparisons, yeah,
students.
I'm just adding to it. Competition and comparisons, because people, teachers used to compare. Ke, matlab, if that student can do that well or is getting so and so grade, why can't you?
Hmm.
So yeah,
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल सो वो
completely
ये
agree.
मुझे ये कह रही थी कि it became so tough in school, like because बच्चे भी pitted against each other और compete
Yeah.
कर रहे हैं
Yes.
और
Yeah, yeah.
share नहीं कर रहे हैं और unhealthy kind of environment. So she felt that even though she was in a very competitive college, she said that people were different. We were still
Mhm.
sharing, we were competing, but there was not this kind of unhealthy, stressful
Yeah.
competition and mean
It
competition.
was not toxic, basically,
Toxic,
the
yes, that's
environment.
the word.
Yeah.
That's the word. Yeah, so I think for all of us, we're on the same page. College has been kinder or a better
Yes.
experience,
Yes.
Yes.
right?
Learning wise, absolutely.
Learning wise, absolutely, absolutely. So when did you at any point in your college time feel unsure of your direction? Did you feel lost at
I
any
did.
point?
I for sure absolutely did, because in school, I'll start from school because I think that sort of set the tone and direction for me because I was always interested in, humanity-based subjects, art. I was good at in art, but and I always wanted to pursue art, but at least in my day and age, I knew that there was never a career,
Yeah.
if you studied art or focused on it, apart from going to NCA or, getting a degree in architecture. I think that was the only outcome for you when it came to art.
Yeah.
So yeah, it did, I had an epiphany because of course I went into marketing, which is, the creative side. But I did feel unsure and directionless at one point because I have always used to think that what if I pursued this career, because I draw. It is now that I realize that I am good at art. It is something that I could have pursued, and had I done it, maybe I could have been something in that particular field. But I did not. And in university, I did sort of feel there were points then where I used to feel that, if had I pursued, another degree, because now when you see university students now, there are a lot of, degrees and programs that, hone and sharpen your skills, in the sense that if you want to pursue, graphic designing, if you want to pursue fashion designing, whatever. I mean, there's so many fields in different universities that they offer, which was not the case back then. There were a handful of subjects and things that you could choose and go into. So yeah, I did feel directionless, at certain points, but then again, I sort of channeled it into, what I was doing, since marketing and doing, marketing was the creative side that I could, that was the option that I had. But I sort of accepted it and, channeled it, in other ways that did really benefit me as well. So yeah.
Well, I was going to say that I never really felt unsure of my direction. I did feel very conflicted. So I was very passionate about humanities subjects, and like that was my reason for living. But I wasn't able to pursue that. So I ended up undertaking a degree in psychology. And even then, I thought, okay, clinical psychology is a bit more interesting and it will keep me engaged. But the really difficult part was my bachelor's degree, because that's a lot of foundational psychology. You don't get too in depth into the clinical aspects. You study things like visual perception and memory, which I was finding really, really dull and struggling with quite a lot. I would have a lot of moments of angst about what I was doing because I wasn't really enjoying it. I wasn't engaged. And I think I would have some moments of like, oh, if I were doing a literature degree instead, I would be happier, or I would be doing better. So I think like there was some regret initially, which was difficult, but I did have a clear sense of direction and like a career path in mind and what I needed to do. It became easier on my master's because that was very clinically focused and I was learning things that were exciting and fun, and I was feeling like, okay, this is what I want to study. So it was easier later on, but initially quite difficult.
Okay.
So like I was fortunate or unfortunate both, that like if you are to be a doctor, it's usually that like your parents have decided that like the very moment you're born, and all your life you don't know that there's a different option.
Yeah.
And like through college, also like through how you don't know, so like you don't feel lost like that. It's really unfortunate also. And also like back in my school, so there was there was none of humanities. You could only do sciences there. Like there was not a choice there even. You didn't get to decide your subjects. So there was like a fixed script, and that's how it is in metrical system almost. And that made it easy for me, unfortunately.
Well, you enjoy being a doctor, right?
So I didn't for the most part, like like for the most part of my education, but like eventually like during post graduation, where like for the first time in your life, like as a doctor, that's for the first time in your life when you choose like what you will be, and like where I chose psychiatry, and that was my turning point. That changed everything for me, and I loved being that. But like originally, like the whole idea of becoming a doctor and all, no, that was not a fun experience.
Chale, so good that you found your way and then you've found your calling. And I think you're very fortunate to have found your calling.
I think I didn't feel directionless in the sense that I always knew what I wanted to do. So I knew that my undergrad, I did history and literature. I knew I wanted to do a law conversion and then my bar at law. But within that, I just feel like I did not know what I want from life. Like I
Mm.
knew what I should want from life, right? Or what the markings of a successful person are, but I did not know what. I think I was very confused up until my late 20s. I think I had a
Mm.
very idealistic, romanticized version of what my life goals were,
Mm.
which were perhaps somewhat detached from reality, somewhat like I don't know. Like I just feel, I always envied people. There are people who are like, this is the life that we
Yeah.
want. Like for
Mm.
someone, it could be like, I want to make money, right? And
Mm.
they're like investment banking में जाना है, ये करना है, वो करना है, बाहर काम करना है, promotion होगी. For me, it was just like I want to be a lawyer, but I want to be the best at what I do.
Mm.
वो what क्या है वो मुझे नहीं पता. But I
Mm.
want कि everyone knows कि she's the person in this field. And that is like, and there's something else that I think you touched upon, which was failure, right? The importance of failure. I believe like I had a crippling fear of failure. And I
Mm.
think that in my 20s
Mm.
was spent kind of navigating that, which is, and that stops you, it cripples you in a sense that before you can even start something, you're
Mm.
already like, these are all the reasons this will not go perfectly. So I must not.
Yeah.
So that talking yourself out of something before you even do it, that is something that I think I mean, this is a bit off topic,
No,
but
no.
that's something that I think I was struggling with in
Yeah.
college, in
Mm.
my 20s, in work, in trying new things, my own projects that I potentially wanted to start. That fear of failure, even in a personal context, I think
Mm.
it really, really holds you back. And perfectionism is, glorified, but I think it is the most damaging thing that you can do to yourself is like be that like obsessive perfectionist, because it will hold you back from so many things
Yeah.
in your life.
And it's unnecessary pressure that one puts on oneself. I hear you. I
Yes.
understand perfection, and it's nothing. It does nothing but damage. I think it just puts
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
a crippling anxiety भी हो जाती है because you just want to be the
yeah,
best,
yeah.
best. Yeah.
It's restrictive. Like
Uh,
it restricts you in so many ways, I think.
I feel also, do we ever sit and define what is best for us? I mean, like,
Oh,
okay, I want to be the best at this, but what do I mean when I say I want to be the best at this? Is it monetary? Like, is it,
exactly.
वो है, yeah. So many times मैं भी ये सोचती हूँ कि ठीक है, you want to keep earning, you want to earn this much, you want to earn this much, because sometimes sometimes we equate success with money, and
Money.
how much money is enough. You spoke about failure. So has your understanding of failure and success has there been a shift? Do you see it differently now, Mehrunisa?
I think I'm it's still an ongoing process. I think
Yeah.
I'm still trying to battle my fear of failure. In some ways, I think I have done it. Like in other ways, I feel like it's something that still comes up. But I think in terms of my definition of success and failure, I think that has changed a lot. I think I no longer see those things as black and white.
Mm.
Um, and I think I see success as much more multifaceted also now, right? Like
Yes.
there's so many forms of success, and
Yeah.
it's not just professional or achievement, like career,
Mm.
oriented success. It's success is so many things. In
Yeah.
some ways, I think my mother is an incredibly successful woman, right? Just in terms of the things that she's done around the house, things she's done in raising me. Those are perhaps not that's not a traditional
Mm.
definition of success, but I'm able to see that as success also now. It might be a small thing, it might be overcoming a fear you have in a small way, right? Like
Mhm.
approaching a situation in a day, and for example, for me, putting aside my fear of failure, or taking an initiative, okay, oh, it's not going to succeed and be amazing, and overcoming that to take that first step. That is success. So I think not seeing it as this black and white, ab hai or ab nahi hai, but it's small moments in your day, every day, that are success, basically. That means that you've been successful in that. So that's how my definitions are evolving, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Overcoming a fear is a huge success.
Yeah.
And doing it regardless is hugely, you're successful. I think maintaining relationships is also a kind of success.
Someone asked me this question. They said, there's no, it's a fantasy world. What would your ideal life look like? You can have anything, any job, any career, any like. And I was like, I have no idea. And this was
Mm.
like, in my late 20s, early 30s, if someone still asks me, I'll be like, I don't know.
Mm.
And that is bad. That really should make us rethink our whole education system. If people are coming out on the other side and they don't know what they want from life, that's a bad sign. And
Mm. I
for
mean, we
me,
No,
it's
are,
a
I
bad
completely
sign.
agree. Same.
I feel
Very,
we are
very
a
true.
work in progress. Farah would be able to
Yeah.
answer this better. I do feel that we are a work in progress. So I think we're evolving, changing, realizing, understanding, whatever, throughout till the day we die. So it never
Yeah,
really
yeah.
stops. Growth never stops. And you know what the questions you're asking, ye sahi hai ya galat hai. But you see the fact that you're talking about it and you recognize certain things, that for me is a success. So Farah, how, yeah, again, wait, success, failure, badla, has it changed in any way for you? What does it mean?
Yes, I think so. I think, again, school really inculcated a strong sense of competitiveness
Mhm.
and like this feeling of needing to be the best at what I do. And sometimes to the point that it was burning me out professionally. And I think over time I've come to realize that really it doesn't matter. There is nobody sitting there assessing, evaluating, going to be like, oh, you're the best therapist ever. You're not. You're number 2, 3, 4 on the list. No. So just trying to do what I enjoy doing as well as I can in my circumstances is enough. But I think also just what you were saying earlier about life and what Mehrunisa was saying about sometimes not having really had a chance to understand what one wants from life. I think that's something that sometimes is missing in education in terms of the idea that what is a life well lived? Like, what does it mean to each individual? I don't think that's something we think about very often. And it's something I've been reflecting on more and more because I was reading up on something related to my work, and it's a therapy modality where they put a lot of emphasis on living a life in line with your values and like what values are most important to you. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, I know some things are important to me, but like in values terms, what does that mean? And really trying to reflect deeper. So I think I wish that was something that were a part of education as well, having opportunities to think about that, what it means to each person and what they'd want for themselves, how they'd like to live their lives. Because I might be going off on a tangent, so you can stop me here. But I see so much distress and like emotional turmoil and like people feeling unfulfilled because they're not sure of how they'd want to live their lives. There are things we're told that we should want or that are acceptable or that are supposed markers of success. But I think it differs so much for each individual that even if you manage to achieve all of that, sometimes you won't be satisfied and you won't be content. And that can be more important.
Mm. So I think what I'm hearing from both of you is this kind of clarity that we need to to understand both failure and success, and to
Mhm.
understand what it means to us, to what failure means to us and what success means to us, and then not be defined by each.
Yeah, it's not a static state that you are
Yeah.
in. Okay, now
Yeah,
I've arrived at success, now I've arrived at failure, and it's
Yeah.
yeah,
here. It's fluid in every hour, it's shifting
Yeah.
also. Like,
like life is
um,
going. Yeah,
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Hassan, what about you?
Yeah.
Success, failure?
Yeah. Yes, so in school, success and failure had a very linear definition. It was all boxed in the realm of grades. So,
Hmm.
back in and somewhat in university as well, but of course it changed a bit there. But yeah, of course, I mean, you understand that, like everyone else has mentioned, absolutely true. Success cannot be, measured by, specific markers. And I just want to reiterate what, Mehrunisa and Farah said, that, a lot of us, including me, like I mentioned, that, I felt directionless and aimless in university. A lot of us don't know what we actually want to be. And, I've been having these conversations with a lot of people. I been, had there been a chance, back then I would have pursued, for example, culinary arts because I love cooking. This is something that I realized, after when I joined college. So, um now I come to realize that this is something that I really wanted to do. But then again, it is again fluid. You can't box yourself in by saying that, I want to be this or that. But for me, now I realize that this is something that I could have done and ventured into, because back then I didn't know. I was, somewhat directionless. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Of course, doing a BBA in marketing and finances, is something that everyone does because that is what is being
Same.
offered to you rather than what you wanted to do. Because again, in school, we were never given the sort of training in school that, where your mind was open to the fact that what do you really want to achieve and do, later in life. And that is something that, I've had an epiphany, and I'm realizing now that, this is, what I love, this is what I want to do. And again, getting success into that, for example, last week, I ventured into, the public arena of, offering my food to people. I opened a stall, somewhere. And the crippling fear that I always had, that I might not be good enough, and, what I'm doing, I might fail at it. But, after now in retrospect, since it just happened last week, I can, I have a sense of calm, and I can say that no, if you're good at something, and you really have to sort of believe in yourself, because even if you fail, that's fine. But coming to terms with failure is again something, I think, in our generation, no one is, taught to accept failure. You're just taught to be the best. You're taught to just succeed, succeed, succeed. But coming to terms with failure is something that, I think it really needs to be, addressed and talked about.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, the sense of failure, that you always, have a fear, and I have that, that it's really stopped me from doing a lot of things. But this is a very interesting conversation, because a lot of elements that, have been talked about, I think that it resonates with me personally. So
Hmm.
yes,
Well, it's never too late to start what you really, feel that is your
yeah,
calling. I know that I went to study at the age of 42 and, I did an MPhil at that age. उससे पहले ना
wonderful.
इतनी समझ भी नहीं थी और to be honest टाइम भी नहीं
Mm.
था and resources भी नहीं थे. ये तो शुक्र है स्कॉलरशिप हुई तो चली गई लेकिन what I'm saying is that it's never too late. I think that is one thing I would like to tell you all young people. Yeah, जब तक pursue whatever you want to pursue.
Mm.
Hassan, we will come to your cafe soon.
So, like, as Hassan said, like, yeah, definitely, like, the idea of success back then was very deterministic and objective. And from me personally, the idea of failure success was like the exact idea of failure and success that was out there, like the same as the system had. Of course, like, unlike today. And like in school, it was quite a cruel idea. That, like, back then, the idea of success was to meet the maximum, like achieve the grades that are like the maximum grades that are humanly possible. That was the kind
Yeah.
of measure for success. And of course, like, measure of success was like if, like, eventually you get into medical school, medical college. That was like a very harsh idea of success. And idea of failure back in school was like uh, so it's like so we couldn't possibly imagine failure, because like growing up, like all of your life, like you've been told, okay, you have to be, let's say, a doctor, and all of your life you're absolutely not prepared for like how life is like if you eventually fail to do that. Like it's like a black canvas. There's nothing over there. It's kind of like that scale, like you have absolutely no idea like what happens uske baad. Your whole idea of life like demolishes work. So that was a very scary. Not that, and after like in once I got into medical school, it changed drastically. So the idea, like externally, the idea of success was okay, you were passing, you were getting through. And usme you didn't have to achieve like quite high grades because you weren't preparing for like something next in your life. Like this is it. Like that was a very kind idea. You had to pass. You had to prove that you can do the bare minimum. Bare minimum, like the acceptable. There are some objective acceptable standards that you have to meet, which are reasonable. That got quite easy, and like I was eventually relieved, and like, life has been easy ever since.
Yeah, I think we just need to find time to just, reflect, time to just be, and time to maybe sometimes, I'm a list person, so just maybe listing things of क्या चाहते हैं from this decade of our life, for example. So I mean, I am now in my 50s. I've just entered the 50s decade, and I feel that for me also now I need to understand how do I see my life in these 10 years, provided I have those 10 years. But so even when you're in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, I think at the cusp, at the eve, or I mean, when you're just about to turn 30, for example, or 40, for example, you have to think of, I feel that we need to think of things, what means what to us, how do we want to see ourselves, where do we want, again, think of success and failure of the past, and then use that as a guiding force to where you want to go, you know. So I guess, yeah, it's all shifting as long as there is movement. I hope that schools eventually understand the significance of mindfulness, of, maybe introducing a course where, and giving students that, and, moving away from just this achieving, and just focusing on individuals. I wish that would happen. Looking back at all of this, what actually matters in the long run? Think about this. You can take some time to think about, because you're kind of giving this message, not message, but you're sharing your experience with, and somebody may benefit from all that you've said. And अब क्या लगता है आपको? What is it that is important? What really matters?
I think being yourself and staying true to who you are, and being the best of who you can be. I think that is the best thing you can do in terms of, in terms of the question. Because I mean, you can keep on learning, you keep on evolving, but be yourself, you know, to stay true to who you are, always have empathy, because a lot of people nowadays do not have that. So, I mean, the ability and the proclivity to try to learn and grow and improve, that is something I mean, for me, that's very, very important. And
Mm.
specifically when you deal with other people, when you think of yourself and when you think of your future, you want to be a better person, you want to be good for others, and you want to be a good role model
Hmm.
for me. Yeah. I mean, in our society, I mean, I think everyone might, agree with this. We, have this crippling fear what other people might think of us, and that ultimately leads to shaping who you are, or a part of you at least in some way, because we all put on a mask when we go step outside of the room, when we step outside of the house, when we step into the workplace. So there's a, you try to have this veneer where people like you, where people sort of don't dislike you, because there's this fear of people not liking you, or not saying kind things about you enters your mind. So of course the fear of what people might say is something that affects us all, at least in our society.
Yeah. I mean,
But I think it's also, sorry,
no, just
you were saying.
add on to, I mean, so for example, I spoke to this young person who got a job at a particular place, which is great for her because it is going to hone those skills जो उसने पढ़ी हैं और सारा कुछ. But she was saying, but this is not as well known as this company because, imagine saying that कि मैं उस company में काम
Yes.
करती हूँ. And I'm just thinking, but that's how it is, how much of
Yeah.
what
It is.
matters in the end is it is determined by what we feel others will perceive us as.
And I think that's compounded by the age of social media that we're living in also, right? Like
Absolutely.
that's like extremely.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the best advice that I received was from my father, and he said, what others think about you is none of your business.
Yes.
So it should be so irrelevant to you. Of course, within reason. I'm not saying start making a scene in the middle of the road, but I mean it's
Yeah.
but I mean, if that's what makes you happy, that's what makes you feel truly alive, then
Uh-huh.
go and do it. But you should
Yeah.
not be bogged down by कोई और
Mm.
क्या सोचेगा, क्योंकि that I think that makes you vibrate at a lower frequency, and I think
Absolutely.
that makes you sometimes,
Mm.
you are denying aspects of yourself that
Yes.
make you yourself, and that prevents you from arriving with authenticity in every
Hmm.
situation that you are in. If you are so scared कि अब मैंने ये कह दिया तो इस तरह, so there's
Hmm.
no end to it. If you get
Exactly.
into it, there is no end to it. You be the most vanilla, diplomatic, neutral person, there will still be someone who will find something horrible to
Yes.
Hmm.
say, think
Absolutely.
about you, judge you on.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be, and I think for me, the most liberating part of my life was my late 20s, where I think I finally started shedding that concern कि कोई क्या सोच रहा है, कोई क्या कहेगा, and this is who I am. If I'm proud of these, the person that I am, I think I'm not harming anyone. And if the people I love and whose opinion I respect and care about are okay with it, I don't care how other people take it. And I think that is really, really liberating, genuinely.
So when we think of what matters in the end, Hassan, you're saying being true to yourself, and Mehrunisa, you're saying not really bothering about external voices, focusing
Yeah.
within and doing what you want to do and what is true to you. So that is what
Yeah.
matters in the end, and that is all. So that is what you have kind of conclusion come to after all these years of, say, schooling, education, learning, unlearning, all of that. Okay.
Yes. I would say that what I feel truly matters is kindness. I feel that it's a value that sometimes almost discouraged, especially in children in school. Like so much competitiveness and sometimes nastiness is inculcated, but you don't really see much about kindness. And I see it, and I believe
Absolutely.
it's an underrated value. Like
Yeah.
kindness, in my experience, has been so life changing in terms of even with my teachers in education. There were some teachers who really made an effort with me, like in younger grades, and did their best to like help me be more confident or just to be supportive. I still remember this one sixth grade teacher who was giving out our exams after they'd been marked, and she said, "I know you can do so much better." And it was just that moment where you get a sense that, oh, somebody believes in me. This is not somebody
Absolutely.
labeling me as, oh, you're a weak student, you're never going to do well.
Yeah.
So I remember a lot of my teachers very fondly because of the kindness and the effort that they made with me. And then at university, a lot of the friends I made, and just the kindness in being included, kindness in small acts of thoughtfulness that help, people come out of their shell. So that's a value I hold very dear. And I think that's something that is life changing for oneself and also for the people around you if you live up to that value.
Hmm. That's, yeah, that is of wonderful value. And sometimes I feel that as we are progressing, please correct me if I'm wrong, with the younger generation, I feel it's becoming more about success at any cost. It's all
Mm,
about me just succeeding, 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 and thoughtfulness somehow kind of is kind of left behind.
mm,
Kindness is seen as a weakness. Kindness and vulnerability, I think nowadays is seen as, a weakness in the person, which is extremely, sad to see
Yeah.
because, you get to meet a lot of people, at work, in anywhere else where you see, that maybe these people did not receive the kindness that they
Yeah.
should have at an early age because not being kind with people affects and hones, sort of shapes you when you grow up. So you
Hmm.
get to see the net result of, someone not having received a lot of kindness in school,
Hmm.
in university, in your personal, professional, or in any capacity. So you
Hmm.
you do get to see that, and I completely agree with her. I mean, empathy and kindness, both, they're intertwined, and I think having those qualities is very, very important. And nowadays, people, think it's a disadvantage to be kind, and people think you as weak. At
Hmm.
least I have seen that in a professional capacity, because someone recently came up to me, and it was really, jarring because, I try to be very kind, mellow, at work because, you try to be as amiable and as friendly and as approachable. And someone said, why don't you should be a little more confident, man. And I said, really? How do you think so? And this person said, you try you the way you talk and how you approach people, it seems as if you're very mellow. And I said that's something that I am very cognizant of, and I know, because I can be be having hubris and being all out loud, and just stating things here and there does not make you confident. you
Mm-hmm.
know Being humble and being kind is, again, this was the first time recently that I thought, again, I sat and did a bit of introspection, thinking that does being kind and being mellow and being approachable make you look weak, or or does that translate into a lack of confidence?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's everyone else's perception. Of course, what she thought might be I mean, I can't judge someone else for
Yeah.
perceiving me as I am, but again, yeah, it did strike a chord that being kind and being having empathy, people take that as a weakness.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. So I think just be yourself and everything is fine. And
Yeah.
maybe towards the end of my career, I mean, not career, I mean, I'm still teaching, but I used to sometimes wonder, oh my God, what kind of children are we sending out in the world? ये
Mm.
अगर values हैं. So anyway, Zohaib, we'll just quickly have your input and then we'll put an end to that.
Mm.
We have seven
So
minutes.
like
Mhm.
what I think actually matters in the long run. So like this is the kind of question I'm like forced to, yeah, like I'm tempted to bring in my perspective, my professional perspective, because that also colors like what I actually think on this, and it's kind of nuanced. And like so I think growing up, like yes, like success and approval, that was quite the value. I see like something new happening, that I think there's now this counterculture where like many kids get singled out for these kinds of drive. Like you come across someone who's like so into like success and approval, and like they start getting singled out. Yeah, like if not like socially, like when they come across like Joe popular mediums of like self-help mediums, or like general like
Mm.
information over the internet, it kind of actually discourages them to be like very focused on success and approval. So here's what I think everyone comes up with like a different, everyone is born like, yeah, at least grow up to develop a different kind of need, okay, like an internal need. Some people have this need for achievement, they feel that they have to achieve, others have to, they have this need for approval, and then some have this need for
Mm.
power. Like so like some people have this inherent need, okay, they need achievement, yeah, approval. And I think so this will be a bit of controversial, like, and I think that that has to be respected. Like if you need approval, if you need achievement, that can be like an innate drive. It's just that you have to admit to that being your value. Like as in like if you want approval, you have to admit to the fact that it's because that's how you like it, that's how you want it, not because like that's how the world is looking at you. Like it's not that if you don't get if you're not getting that kind of approval, it's not that the world is like
Mm.
you're being shunned and all, but it's that I am feeling not so good about it, because that's how I am like, and
Mm.
I'm pursuing it because that's what makes me happy, and that's how you like, that's how you're being truly true to yourself. Like I think the contemporary idea, it goes a bit too far, where it tells you, okay, like you have to forget like the rest of the world and like the global metrics of achievement, success. I think you don't have to. You
Mm.
just have to acknowledge that those are your very own, and own them, and just be it. Maybe that's what makes you happy, and just be competitive if that's what it is. So
No, there's
that's what I
nothing
think.
wrong with, yeah, being competitive, and there's nothing wrong with wanting acknowledgement. I think we all do want, we all need that kind of acknowledgement and those positive strokes, right?
So you just have to establish that that's what you genuinely want.
और मिल
And
जाते हैं, I think
what
somewhere on the, I mean, you do get, some will give, like Hassan, आप जैसे कह रहे थे, kindness is looked at as a weakness. So ठीक है, that person can view it this way. Someone else may
Mhm.
really value that in you.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. And I don't, I don't judge someone who thinks of
yes,
kindness as
yes,
a
yes,
weakness, because through their lived experience, I'm sure, their journey is different to
yes,
mine. So
yes.
of course they view things, they view the world in a different spectrum, completely differently. So I mean, there should be dichotomy of opinion. So I mean,
हाँ,
good. I mean, there's
absolutely.
good in
all is
that.
good. So that's coming from a very kind space. I know, Farah, wouldn't you say that?
Yes.
That for
I
his
would.
comment on how he's looking at someone else and their experiences, etc. So thank you so much for this, all of you. This has been really wonderful, this conversation, and I feel that I have learned a lot from you. And some of the things were reinforced. Some of the things, I mean, I learned something new. Some जो आप बातें कर रहे थे वो कुछ reinforce भी हुआ जो मेरे अपने beliefs हैं about our schooling and how things have been for me versus you, and then versus the newer, the next generation, etc. I hope so this is my very first podcast, and I hope through these conversations, and I don't want to edit anything. I don't know. I want to keep it as raw and as honest as we possibly can be, with the hope that perhaps somebody may find some information that is useful. Somebody may find courage. Somebody may find,
Yes.
like that they may feel that they're not alone, and there are more people like them, and I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all learn, and that's just part of being human. And I also really hope through this podcast that, when we're talking about education, I hope people in authority who are running schools do look at this aspect of, looking at individuals, what they want, how they want to learn. They're more focus on people as opposed to grades. I do understand that matters where you get into, good universities. All of this matters. Parents also put that pressure. But I feel that I hope as a society we sort of um, instill the right kind of values. And आफ्टर ये जो स्कूल एंड कॉलेज के बाद ऐसे बच्चे ना दुनिया में जाए हुआ नॉट काइंड हुआ नॉट compassionate, or just cruel, who just think of just achieving. I think the end of it, the be all and end all, is to be able to live life more meaningfully, to be able to be confident, to be able to understand the significance of success and failure and not be defined by it. And so I do hope that schools and colleges, look at individuals, particularly schools, look at every child as an individual, help them grow, really grow. So thank you so much. You all are
Thank you.
lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
organizing this
Not at all. I
discussion.
hope it's been
Yes.
fun, and I hope you felt that you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it and
Yes.
learned so
Same.
much from all of
Absolutely.
you.
It's such
Yeah.
a wonderful experience listening to everyone, say such wonderful things, and it's been really insightful and, very, very meaningful and eye-opening.
Thank you. Good. I'm
And
so
I
glad.
hope you continue having more of these conversations.
Inshallah.
Absolutely.
That's the plan. That's the
Inshallah.
plan. Yes. Thank you, lovely
Inshallah.
people. Have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You
Bye.
Thank you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.